Welcome everybody to the thesis defense of María Gabriela Marrero González. I would like to thank, first of all, I would like to thank our readers. I'd like to thank you very much for being here. Professors Jane Ramirez and Luis García Nevares. What we're going to be looking at today is a very, very interesting translation and source document, source book about the aqueduct system in San Juan from a historical viewpoint, the water system, the water supply in San Juan. So without further ado, I would like to hand over the floor to María Gabriela so that she can give us the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
And can you hear me good?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfectly. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so thank you very much, thesis committee, for being here. Thank you, Dr. Auerbach, for all of the guidance. My name is María Gabriela Marrero González, and I will be presenting my thesis titled Aqueduct, the History of Water in San Juan, a translation of a fraction of Acueducto, Historia del Agua en San Juan by Dr. Aníbal Sepúlveda Rivera. And Dr. Aníbal is actually viewing this presentation. So I would like to also thank him for all of his advice during this process. So this text came to my attention during my second year of in the graduate program in translation. I was talking with a friend, and she mentioned this book that was published in 2016 by Para Naturaleza, or PLN by its Spanish abbreviation. After researching more about the book, I became interested and ended up choosing it as my source text. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the nonprofit organization, PLN is a unit of the Puerto Rico Conservation Trust, and they aim to safeguard 33% of Puerto Rico's natural areas by 2033. Acueducto is the result of a 10-year research project. The text explores the approach, assembly, and management of the first and only aqueduct in the capital. Its official name in English is the San Juan Waterworks. And this research is based on primary sources from archives in Puerto Rico, United States, and Spain. And it's complemented with original cartography and photography that illustrate the development of the aqueduct throughout time. The first proposal of the aqueduct was designed by engineer Juan Manuel Lombera and Carlos Blum in 1847. It was later completed around the time of the Spanish-American War in 1898 by local engineer Arturo Guerra Mondragon Acosta. In 1945, the municipality of San Juan ceded the Antiguo Acueducto to the Puerto Rico Aqueduct and Sewer Authority. Later in the 1980s, it ceased being used and fell into abandonment. The road to recovery was possible thanks to Dr. Sepúlveda. In 2001, the University of Puerto Rico acquired the aqueduct and its additional installations after Dr. Sepúlveda revealed the potential of the project to the president of the university at the time, Antonio García Padilla. Later in 2005, the university and the organization Para Naturaleza signed an agreement which conferred the rights of usufruct over the aqueduct properties. In 2014, the National Trust for Historic Preservation added the Antiguo Acueducto in the National Register of Historic Places. The visible remains of the Acueducto can be found in the former municipality of Rio Piedras, inside the botanical garden of the University of Puerto Rico. The aqueduct is located in the last remaining fluvial meander of the Rio Piedras, which is the only urban river within the confines of San Juan, and it also forms part of the San Juan Bay estuary. Here you can see the fluvial meander surrounded by bamboos, and in this map you can actually see the river. It starts here in Comerío and it passes through the aqueduct, which is here. Here's the meander, till it ends in the Bahía de San Juan, disgorging in the Bahía de San Juan. In this picture and in this layout, you can see the steam engine house with its boilers and coal deposits, the water pumps and filters, the house for employees, the valve house, the water intake, and the 6 sedimentation and filtration ponds. For this thesis, I chose to translate the first chapter. In the source text, it is titled as Aguas Salobres, Pozos y Fuentes, and in my translation, I titled it Brackish Water, Wells and Fountains. To comply with the word count objective, I also translated the image captions. The segment that I translated opens with the introduction to the hydrological features of San Juan. Then the timeline begins in 1519, when the capital is transferred from Caparra to the San Juan islet. My translation reaches up to the failed invasion of the British. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. The text then goes on exploring the limited water supplies of the time, and it ends with the failed invasion of the British in 1797. Acueducto is a documented journey that covers half a millennium of the history of potable water in San Juan. This historical research provides an insight into how our ancestors managed water sources and built an urban landscape accordingly. Overall, the book pays tribute to the designers and builders who participated over time in the aqueduct. The author encourages readers to understand that potable water in an urban setting is a natural and physical necessity. Regarding the author, he is an urban planner and historian from Puerto Rico, and he's also a former professor at the Graduate School of Planning of the University of Puerto Rico. He holds a PhD from Cornell University in City and Regional Planning, and he's also a ranking member of the Puerto Rican Academy of History. In 2010, he was awarded the Dr. Ricardo Alegría Medal of Architecture. These are his public works. He has also written several essays related to the history of urbanism in Puerto Rico and issues concerning planning in island environments. He has been collaborating with Para Naturaleza since 2005. When I read the text, 2 subjects caught my attention. The first was the importance that the author gives to the conservation of culture and natural resources. And then the richness of historical details provided, which puts into perspective the injustices that Puerto Ricans faced 500 years ago and still continue to experience. So, though the book explores the historical aspect of the aqueduct, one cannot help but relate our current reality to past events, which I summarized into the following subjects: political interests, infrastructure abandonment, public health, natural resource exploitation, public property appropriation, and institutional and financial instability due to lack of funds. After reading this text, the question one is left with is, why is it acceptable that we are still living the very same issues? I refer to the text, The Colonizer and the Colonized by Tunisian writer Albert Memmi. And summarizing the chapter Mythical Portrait of the Colonized, I have the following quote. Living conditions imposed on the colonized by colonization make no provision for it. Indeed, they ignore it. The point is that the colonized means little to the colonizer. Far from wanting to understand him as he really is, the colonizer is preoccupied with making him undergo this urgent change. Paraphrasing this passage, the colonizer does not live nor assumes the conditions of the life they create for the colonized. Far from seeking the reality of the colonized, they only want to subject them. In other words, our current reality is the result of historical events marked by a condition of coloniality. This circumstance infiltrates into our identity and guides our future. Consequently, there is no sense of belonging. Inadequate public policies prevent the preservation of built cultural heritage, abandonment sets in, and decay thrives. With this first effort of translating Sepúlveda Rivera's research, I hope to reach an English language public and raise awareness for the protection of Puerto Rican culture and natural resources, make information accessible to an audience interested in learning about Puerto Rico and its built heritage, and amplify the importance of Puerto Rican history and how it can be used to build Puerto Rico's future. Above all, I would like to encourage others to reflect on the issues posed. While translating, I encountered certain challenges, which I divided into 3 categories: terminology, transcreation, and discrepancy. For this presentation, I chose to summarize all of my challenges and highlighted the ones that I deemed to be the most important. The first challenge encountered was Acueducto, which is first mentioned in the title of the text. As previously mentioned, its official name in English is the San Juan Waterworks. Waterworks refers to a system that supplies water with the help of machinery and other components. On the other hand, we have aqueduct, which is defined as a conduit of water and can also be correlated with ancient water systems such as the Roman aqueducts. These definitions puts into perspective that the Antiguo Acueducto is in fact a waterworks, given that it relied on pump, steam engines, and coals to supply water. Nevertheless, despite this dependency on machinery, the aqueduct did rely on water tanks that were placed on a high hill, which was called during the 19th century Loma de Prim, and it supplied water to San Juan by force of gravity. Therefore, the Acueducto is a mix of ancient and more modern technologies. At the end of the day, I chose the term aqueduct instead of waterworks because I prefer the similarity it has with Acueducto, which allows parallelism between the translation and the original text. We can also see the example of aqueduct being used in English with PRASA, Puerto Rico Aqueduct and Sewer Administration. Next, in terminology, we have ciénagas. I compared the definition in Spanish for ciénaga and pantano and the definition in English for marsh and swamp. So in English, we can see that it provides more description of the vegetation. For example, marsh is characterized by monocotyledons, while a swamp is dominated by woody vegetation. If we observe the Spanish definitions, though, it has not, it doesn't provide the same amount of detail. And in summary, it only says that a ciénaga is pantanosa and a pantano is cenagoso. So what I did to resolve this issue, I looked into 2 sources. The first was a text in English by ecologist H.T. Odom, and its Spanish translation by the State University of Campinas, which states that ciénagas are grassy wetlands and pantanos are inhabited by trees and shrubs. I also found another source, which was an article by the Puerto Rico Department of Natural and Environmental Resources, which describes wetlands, their differences, and it provides the terms in Spanish and English, which match the translation by the University of Campinas. As a result, I chose marsh as the designated term for ciénagas, given that distinct vegetation. Lastly, in terminology, I'm including esteros. For this, I looked at esteros in Spanish and in English. In Merriam-Webster, estero appears as such. And as you can see, both have in the definition estuario. They are hyponyms of estuary. And the first time that the author uses esteros and estuario, we can observe that he doesn't use them as synonyms or hyponyms. He uses them as individual environments. For example, en la región inmediata existía un entramado de ríos, quebradas, lagunas, caños, ésteros, manglares y ciénagas. Este paisaje hidráulico es lo que compone el estuario de la bahía de San Juan. To solve this challenge, I focused on the English definition for esteros, particularly in especially when marshy. Both definitions, English and Spanish, coincide that esteros is a marshy landscape. Since I translated ciénagas as marsh, I chose marshlands then to avoid any confusion with ciénaga. The next challenge is transcreation. This is a passage from a letter regarding a well that was sent to Charles V by Rodrigo de Figueroa, who was the emperor's envoy. I will read the part where enroñando and le hice tornar a abrir appears, which were the two things that I'm highlighting in this passage. La disposición de agua que hay en la dicha isleta es de esta manera. Estaba empezando a hacer un pozo a donde ha de ser el asiento de la ciudad, que es en lo alto sobre el puerto, en que tiene vista a todas partes, y allí se había hallado agua y estaba enroñando. Y en los días en que allí me detuve, le hice tornar a abrir y vila, y es muy buena. Of all the archaic expressions, as I mentioned, enroñando and le hice tornar a abrir were the most difficult. This one I am highlighting because its solution is linked to the definition of enroñando. The first step I did was to look for the definition of enroñando, and in the Spanish dictionary it is defined as llenar de roña, pegarla, cubrir de orín un objeto de hierro. By orín it means oxidation. So what I got from this definition is that the well was covered and the cover had iron in it, and due to the presence of water, it oxidized. And although I thought that this was convincing, I had the possibility to contact the author, and he was able to clarify this doubt as well as many other doubts. And he told me that the term is still used in Andalusia, Spain, and it refers to something filled with trash, weeds, or something soiled with organic materials. And for this specific use, it means the growth of weeds and the presence of organic debris. And of course, after reading this, it makes sense that there would be weeds and debris, given that water promotes life. Therefore, instead of viewing this as very literal, because I thought that it was basically to open that cover, what it really means is that Rodrigo Figueroa wanted to remove the weeds and restore the water, the well, I'm sorry. The translation then was the following: the disposition of water on said island is as follows: A well was being opened where the city is to be settled, which is at the very top above the port with an all-encompassing view. There, water was found, weeds were growing, and debris was present. And during my stay, I urged that it be restored and saw the water. Last, for transcreation, we have a transcription of a legend from 1780 titled Plano de Puerto Rico. I consider this to have been the most difficult archaic passage to untangle. The use of contractions in this text undoubtedly escalated the difficulty of the translation, and as well the very archaic expressions, pay mind to isla, levantado oficial, things like that. And here I highlighted supo, soup, which is referring to the coordinates. These are the coordinates: 18 degrees, 37 minutes north, 59 degrees, 42 minutes west. For this challenge, I even contacted the Real Academia Española via Twitter, and they were not able to confirm, but they did suggest that it might have been a transcription error, and instead of including degrees, supo soup took its place. My guess is that the O in supo is the degree, and the sub part has to do with the superscript configuration. I was able to clarify this doubt and many other doubts regarding this passage with the help of a digitalized layout. In the digitalized version, I was able to zoom in and appreciate very small details because this legend is small and it wouldn't pixelize. In our next challenge, we have discrepancies, and this one is also regarding the letter Rodrigo de Figueroa sent to Charles V, but this time it's concerning a spring. In usual context, fuente is translated as fountain, but here you will see that in the title, I translated fuente as source and kept it in the citation as fountain. My decision was based on this 8th footnote that the author includes. He says that Rodrigo de Figueroa was probably referring to a spring that flowed on the site, un manantial que manaba en el lugar. So I looked for the definition of fuente and fountain, and in both English and Spanish definitions, a fuente and a fountain is regarded firstly as a source of water, and then it is considered as this decorative structure that we are used to. My guess is that the author kept here in the title fuente to maintain that correlation with what Rodrigo de Figueroa was stating. So in order to reach some middle ground, I chose source here as to refer to source of water, yet kept fountain in the citation to preserve the essence of the writer. The last challenge in discrepancies and all of the challenge would be the way that the information is presented versus the correlation with the images. And this is pertaining the translation and the source text. If you compare both texts, you will see that in my translation, the images aren't placed in the same place as the source text. During my translation process, I sometimes had to scroll 2 or 3 pages to understand what image was being referenced. Then I observed the source text, and first I saw that one has the possibility of viewing the pages side by side. And also the information is distributed in 2 columns. That makes it easier for the reader to correlate information with image, unlike in my translation, which is the standard 1 column paragraph format. So for the benefit of my reader and for my benefit, I reorganized the images so that they would be in a position that would agree with the information that was presented. Right. This journey has been demanding yet rewarding. Acueducto has enlightened me greatly about Puerto Rico's past, and the satisfaction of having translated such an complex excerpt is unparalleled. Regardless of the translation that gets to take on the task, I am positive that a complete translation would amplify its exposure to an English language public and to countless institutions and countries. It could even encourage translation into other languages. I am certain that the future publication of a translation will serve to promote concern and care for Puerto Rico's culture, history, and natural resources, as well as open doors to an audience interested in learning more about the island and the richness of its built cultural heritage. Gracias.
Thank you very much, María Gabriela, for a very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
And I would now like to turn over the floor to our readers, who no doubt have comments and observations and perhaps questions. Do we have anyone who would want to be first? Okay, Luis. No. Okay, Jane. Okay, okay, Jane. Jane, go ahead. You're muted.
Okay, I didn't mute myself. And I was told that the host had muted me, so I thought I had to let the host unmute me. Didn't know I could do it myself. Okay, well, all right, then I will go first. I have a lot to say about this. If I had to say just one word, and if Professor Auerbach told me I had to cut down and not talk so long, which he has told me a few times, at least once. If I had to say just one word, the word I would choose was meticulous. And I consider that very high praise, because if you're going to translate a text like this, you have to be detail oriented. You have to be meticulous in what you do. And I'm not going to say it's flawless. There's a few things that I mentioned here and there, and you'll get my comments later and in detail, but you did a really good job of getting the details right.
Thank you.
I appreciate that very much. I prefer translating academic texts, and my preference is Caribbean history anyway, when I get the chance to do that. So I delighted in this. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I've seen this text with you before, right?
Yes. In a seminar that I took with you, that was the very first time that I found the text and I worked with it.
And she did a project for my class that included translation of this text.
Yes.
And I was impressed with it then, and even more so now that I have a PDF to really see what's there. I appreciate very much that you changed the order of the images. Mm-hmm. When you wrote that when I read it in your preface, my first thought was, oh no, I'm going to be having to hunt through pages. But it was easy, because it was easy to find the images. The text continued in the same order, and it was not at all hard to find the images, and that really was nice. It's nice that a few of them went far enough west that I could see where I now live. I could see where Levittown is now on some of them. I love maps, and so this was a treat for me to be able to see this. It's a beautiful book. You've done, again, meticulous applies to the research you've done. You've gone into a great deal of detail on these choices that you made, and I appreciate that. I appreciate being able to see the thought process there. think we have a little problem with one of them. That's one of the ones I was going to go to, but I'll just mention it now, since you did talk about it in your introductory remarks. That lovely list of all the different types of bodies of water and so forth, you resolve that the one by saying marshlands, but you still have marshlands and marshes in that same list. So
Yes.
that's not. And what's the difference between marshlands and marshes?
Okay.
Marshes, I don't know. And I have absolutely no suggestion of how to fix that.
Here I have I didn't include the definition in marshland here.
Okay.
I can look it up right now.
No, if you can
I
find
chose
easily.
marsh. I chose marsh because it had for ciénaga, because it had
Right.
that distinct characterization of the monocotyledons, right? Marshlands.
The grasses instead of the trees and bushes.
But marshlands, so marshlands is more general in the sense it's a marshy tract or area, and that's why I particularly focused on the especially when marshy part of the English definition, because it basically says that, I mean, it could be like a marsh, but it's more general in that sense. So instead of giving it the name of marsh, given that I already had that ciénaga part, I chose to then include marshlands, which would be, in Spanish as well, you can see it with esteros, terreno bajo pantanoso. And in
Yes.
ciénaga in Spanish, a ciénaga is defined as a paraje lleno de cieno o pantanoso.
Yes.
So in English and Spanish sort of happens the same between estero and ciénaga and marshlands. Basically, that was my thought process behind that.
David wants to comment on this.
Yeah, I looked in the text and, look, there were so many details in here that, I mean, even reviewing it, and also going back and forth between various changes that occurred. But one suggestion that you could do for that, where you have marshlands and marshes, the same sentence, just to have some variety, would be to change marshlands there to wetlands.
Okay.
Which is very general, but
Okay.
just to have some distinction. And certainly when we think of San Juan, we can, and I mean, that term, for the coastal areas of Puerto Rico in general, that term is often used, wetlands. Those wetlands comprise this, that, the other thing, so it's a solution.
See, less confusing as well, I see now. Okay.
Well, the two solutions that I think that's a very good solution. I like that. The two solutions that had occurred to me, one of them I don't like at all, which is just leave out one of them. Because sometimes a list cannot be
sometimes
translated with word for word by I'm sorry, go ahead, Luis.
No, sometimes you have to leave some things out.
And
it's just a description.
For the Anglophone reader, just looking at marshland and marsh, it's going to look strange. It's going to seem like somebody made a mistake. And with as careful as you're being with this, I don't want it to look like you made a mistake. So that's one possibility, is to just leave out one of them.
Okay.
The wetlands idea is good. I like that. And then you have a list that has the same number of terms, even if they may not all correspond one for one completely. The other one would be to leave one of the words, probably is it estero or estero? I don't see an accent mark on it, so I wasn't sure how to say it.
Pero,
Estero.
Instead,
accent.
right?
No
Sí.
accent. Estero.
Okay. Maybe just that's a less familiar word. Maybe you could just leave that one in Spanish.
Well, I mean,
Okay,
it is in
all right,
English.
I'm seeing a frown, right, it is. I'm seeing a frown on
So-
David's face, but yes, I remember that now. You did show us that it's, the word exists in English.
It appears.
So
sí.
that might be just
Okay.
calling an estero might be, or an estero. Okay, that is, estero and estero, and it might be the solution to work for you, so. I just didn't want you to leave that marshlands and marsh thing in there. Even though I
agree.
understand the reasoning, I understand. Took me a while. Usually I breeze through somebody's preface and then have to spend more time on the translation because I have to compare it
Mhm.
to the text, which was hard because I printed the PDF and I have to use my magnifying glass with a light to even read the thing. But actually reading that section of your preface took a great deal of concentration.
Yeah,
But it
it
was worth
has.
it.
See, it has a lot of definitions because it's exactly how you said, the whole train of thought is there.
And I could see what you were doing and what your logic was. So anyhow, okay,
Mhm.
did someone say something? I'm sorry. So that's enough on that one. I'll skip trying to find it. I'm going to try to manage without having to show with just my notes, without having to present my comments here. I think I can remember what they all are. But just another couple of things with you. And then I have 2 or 3 problems that come up time and again in these translations.
Mhm.
And that I think there must be some better phrase to use in English than the one that we customarily use, which is the one that you used, María Gabriela, because that's what we teach in the class, that you should use it. So for my last 3 comments, I'm going to be asking my colleagues to see if we can't come up with something better. So I'll hold off on those. Did you have a style manual? For some reason, I thought you had told me MLA, but then I didn't find it anywhere in your bibliography, so I don't know.
I did use MLA because that was the one that the book also uses. But
Okay.
yes, I didn't include that in my bibliography.
Okay. I think it should be. I always ask the students to include that there. So try to do that. So there were a few places that I've asked you to check your MLA because I'm not as familiar with MLA as I am with CMOS.
Okay.
So
But the thing with MLA is that it says do this or whatever your teacher or your professor tells you to do. So
well, that's
just be consistent on whatever you decide.
Exactly. That's a lot of it. And I did not check, like, for instance, your bibliography style in detail because it looks like MLA style. And it was very consistent. And as long as it's, I agree. In fact, I was even told that in a book I translated. And I asked, it was for University of North Carolina, and I asked them about the footnotes because they were not any, excuse me, I'm fighting a cough. I have a cough drop in my mouth. I apologize, but
Okay. Don't worry.
I thought I had taken care of that. That's why you posts, if you saw me disappear, my camera go off. It was not a camera problem. It was me needing to take care of those problems. But I apologize for bringing it up.
No
What
worries.
was that? Thank you.
About
was that?
the footnotes. You were gonna say something
Mhm.
about the footnotes that you have.
Oh,
asked
all right.
colleagues?
Just that UNC told me when I said the author is not following any style in particular with his notes, but he's very consistent in his own style wherever he got it. What do you want me to do? And they said, no, it looks good. It's consistent, so leave it. And I translated it and left it in the same format he did. So they agreed that consistency is the key.
Okay.
And readability, and of course, in the completeness of the information. So, so anyhow, it looked good, so I didn't worry too much about it. One thing that bothered me is in two places, if I recall correctly, you had maybe more. I remember two of them. You had multiple footnotes in a row.
Like following.
You came to the end of you came to the, or I should say, footnote call out numbers. You'd come to the end of a paragraph, you'd end the text, and then you'd have number 4 and number 5 superscript, and referring with both of them together, referring to the footnotes and which were in consecutive order.
In my preface.
And there was one time when there were like 4 of them in the 20s, I think it was 28, 29, 30, 31 or something like that.
See,
there were 4 of them together. It
Mhm.
looked really strange to me, and I've never seen this in a published book, but maybe I'm just not paying attention. Maybe that's common. So, but I Googled multiple consecutive footnote numbers, MLA, and it didn't exactly answer my question, but what I found said one of the uses of footnotes is when there are several sources to combine them into one footnote, and they gave me examples of them. And I have seen that. I have seen many sources. I've seen, again, with that same author that had his own style of footnotes. Some of his footnotes mentioned 12 or 15 sources. See this guy and also see this guy, and for more on this, see that guy, when it was all in one footnote.
Okay.
However, I looked at that one where it was in the 20s and where there were 4 of them together, and they were extremely long footnotes between the long Spanish titles of those old documents and the long URLs. I don't know whether combining them is good or not. In fact, that was one of the ones I was going to consult my colleagues on. Which looks worse, to have 4 numbers, 4 superscript numbers following the text, or having
maybe separate them by commas and just leave them like that.
Okay. David, you're muted.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, I found it, and it's in the 30s. It's in the 30s. It's like 37, 38, 39, something like that.
Okay, that sounds right.
I would actually combine that into one footnote and just have all the different sources, and you could, it's a very long footnote, but I wouldn't have it like those multiple numbers within the this multiple superscript numbers seems a little bit bizarre.
Right, that's what I felt.
The thing is that we're referring to that, you know, we're referring to that passage. I would just, you know, change it to one individual footnote, but you could have all of that information in the footnote. Does that make any sense?
Sí, I have a question. Okay, so
I'll
we
show-
come,
It's where I found it, it is, footnotes 36, 37, 38, 39.
okay, I'm gonna open it.
But, you know, I really don't know what to do with this because it's so much, you know,
Yes. It's
Because if I
enough.
combine it, can it be like the first, right, the first source, then
leave it like
enter the
that.
second source,
Just leave it
just
like
like
that.
erase.
Comma, comma, comma. Don't.
Todo junto as a
No, just
long
put a comma.
paragraph.
Just put a comma between each
Between the
one of the
superscript
footnotes,
numbers,
and that's it.
you're
It's
saying the
first in
superscript
the-
numbers?
Yeah, just put a comma between every superscript, and that's it. So
Between every superscript.
you
that, I
know,
mean,
You
No,
mean
no nos compliquemos la vida.
the text itself?
Huh?
You mean the actual footnote numbers in the text itself, the superscript ones?
Yeah, just 38, 39, 40, 41.
I wouldn't do that. I think for me, it seems more logical to just have one footnote there. And then, because sometimes footnotes, I mean, look, especially you do something like philosophy or something like, you'll have footnotes that are this long,
To
so
go on to another page, yes.
yeah. Or
You can just use one number and then each corresponding footnote that you eliminate, just hit enter and just put it right under it.
yeah.
Exacto.
One
And just like
paragraph.
eliminate the super.
Yeah, that's another
Mhm.
option.
Okay.
Enter,
But
and that would be good. If not, you need to separate them by semicolons.
Semicolon.
Mm-hmm.
exacto, semicolon, exacto.
Yeah.
And
it-
I've seen that a lot, but usually the footnotes are set.
Yeah.
Else.
Yeah, your sound your audio is not so great, Jane. I don't know what happened.
I don't know either.
Now,
Okay.
now you're okay.
You're fine now. Mhm.
Okay, I just moved closer to my laptop.
And,
Okay. I don't have sound in my earbuds anymore. Those earbuds went bad, so I'm just using computers' microphones. I'll try to get something better. Okay, moving on, then something needs to be done about that, but
Mhm.
the other, okay. I won't go find it because I don't want to take a lot of time, but I want everybody else's permission on this, particular David, who's your advisor, but also Luis. There is one paragraph when he's talking in I don't have the details, or I don't have the page number because I was trying to find it in my text, but I don't want to present. He says in the same paragraph, he says about 4 different times, there was ample water available on the San Juan islet, but they needed to prove that in order to get people to approve moving the capital to the island. And he says that in different ways about 4 times. In that paragraph, it had already been mentioned a couple paragraphs back. It's mentioned again a few paragraphs afterwards. And each one of those added a little bit of information. But if people don't mind, I think that probably could be rewritten, and those 3 consecutive sentences that say more or less the same thing could be reduced to 2 or even 1. I have it marked clearly in there. Does anybody object to the idea principle?
What? I don't know what you're talking about. Do you need to?
Let me see if
I
I
know.
can find it. Let me see if I can.
I know you don't know where it is because I can't. All right, let me.
What does
let me
it
go
say?
look at
I can find it if you tell me the exact wording. I can just find
I'm
it.
looking for it.
Oh,
Okay. Word has just changed the way it does the search, the find and replace, and now I can't make it work.
I think it's in the relocating the
Okay.
capital. Would be there.
Mhm. Okay, it is on, I can tell you what page in just a moment.
Mhm.
If I can find my scroll bar. Oh, please, won't work. It's on page 8 of the translation.
Okay.
yeah. And you need to tell me exactly the paragraph, because page numbers are different when you use Word document. That's why we need to have these
Yes.
sent in PDF. Because PDF
Yes, but
numbers don't
I
change.
cannot make comments. I can't make comments on the PDF.
You can make comments and you
Not
can.
my long detailed ones. I've tried it. Never mind. We'll
I
work
can
on that
show
again.
you. I can show you sometime.
Yes,
but you
it is in the relocating the capital section, and it says, this is not how I planned to do this.
No, I see what you're talking about.
Thank you.
I see what you're talking about, but it's not really necessary to, to really go directly there now. You have the notes that you're going to
Yes.
send to Maria
Yes.
Gabriela. And I see.
Yeah, but she wanted us to give some.
Okay, there are 3 sentences, if you can listen and get it, there are 3. Having just in the previous paragraph said that general idea, stated that general idea that we needed to know that there was water available so we know if we wanted to move the capital or not. So we have the sentence, knowing that there was indeed some availability of water was based on empirical evidence, as many had visited the island and were familiar with its territory.
Mhm.
The most important factor that led to the decision of transferring the capital was assuring the availability of water. That had already been said. The relocation would have not been considered without first proving it was possible to meet the water needs of an emergent city. And it's not, I mean, it's okay as it is. It just said, when I was reading it, I thought, okay, point made. Point made, point made. But like, and then it's repeated again. And of course, obviously, it's because this is an important thought. But I just think that you could probably condense that. And I was asking my colleagues if in theory you are okay with the idea of condensing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, well, that's a place where I would do it. In general, I didn't find that. I didn't find much of that, but I did in that particular section.
That, that's an issue also. It's an issue of style in the source text that can be reworked. There's no reason why, that's a stylistic element because it's a repetition. So I don't see any particular reason why that cannot be reformulated.
Okay. I just didn't want Maria Gabriela, I didn't want you getting in trouble with somebody saying you left out a whole sentence there. So
No.
My suggestion would be that there are certain tiny little elements in those sentences that can be preserved and just then condense it into one.
Okay.
But I'm sorry. Why do you? It's repeated in the whole section.
Luis, if you can search your document, can't you, Luis?
I'm right here at the paragraph you're talking about.
They're so redundant. They're very, very redundant. And that's what Janus is complaining about. I think
it's a closing paragraph for a section. I don't know if we're not editing. We're not editing the book. We're translating. I mean,
No, that's not true because translation is also a process of editing, and it's all.
Yeah, but no. This is not the exercise we're asking students. We're asking for translation or for an edition.
Okay, well, this is why. So Maria Gabriela gets to make.
I disagree. And it's just, and also, Luis, it's a minor adjustment. We can make 2 sentences out of 4. So and they can be long sentences, but it's a minor adjustment that would make it read better in English. And that's all, and also might be a suggestion for the author to reconsider that, in the source text, but I don't see any problem with it whatsoever. And these kinds of things occur all the time.
Well, as you said, it's stylistic.
Yeah.
Thing of the author. It's the author's style.
Yes, however, we're not talking about Proust here. We're talking about a document that is informational and based in a historical document. We're not talking about something that we're not talking about Ezra Pound. We're not talking about Cervantes. We're not talking about a literary work. We're talking about a document that seeks to convey information. If there's a problem in that conveyance that can be resolved in the translation, I see no issue with that whatsoever.
Well, I think it's something, Maria Gabriela, you should consider, and if you decide that it's appropriate, you do it because it's your translation. I mean, I wouldn't. I think it's the translator's decision to do it or not. So well, she could decide whatever she feels like.
James,
information.
What? It got.
Your audio is gone
Your
again.
audio is. Go ahead. Ay, no te oigo. Try.
And here, and
Does it have to do something with the
Yeah.
mic?
Yeah, you when you move something a little bit for it worked better.
is this
No.
all I did before was.
You were better.
No.
No.
All the things.
You moved around a bit, and can you unplug that?
Sí.
Yeah.
Okay. Now move toward the computer.
Todavía no, ay Dios.
But you
Problemas
before
técnicos.
unplugging it, you kind of moved it a little bit and you were perfect and then you unplugged it. So I think it has to do like with the mic, no?
Well, there is no mic.
There's no mic.
No.
Okay. Okay.
Oh,
Just for me.
Okay.
Or Jane, just a question, and you can also respond by messaging. But was that the final point that you wanted to? No, it wasn't. Okay.
There was one
it's
last.
this- Can you hear me now?
A little
Sí, better.
Okay, just as I came back, I saw something after I plugged it in again. Can you hear me?
Sí.
I saw something on the screen very briefly and it disappeared that said that the microphone is changed.
now it's working. Okay, go ahead.
It's working okay. Okay, I'll be as brief as I can on this one, and I just remembered that our author is actually listening here,
Mhm.
and that's pertinent to what I'm going to talk to you about right now. The very first line of your translation.
Okay. Let me go.
And I don't have it. I'm not going to try to scroll. It will waste time.
It's okay.
But
I'm here.
you have history when the source text has historiografía. The history of San Juan and the historiography of San Juan. There's a difference, and I think it's important, and I wish I could ask the author, because I feel like it reveals his whole part of his philosophy here, because several times when he's going to give his information, he says something about lesser known aspects of the decision to move to San Juan, for instance. Something that people may not realize. I feel like he's doing historiography. He's filling in the blanks that he feels of aspects of history that have been left out. And that's about how people write history.
Jane,
To me, I think it's important to make historiography.
historiography is fine. Historiography is about writing about history.
Exactly.
Okay, that's fine. That can be changed. That can be changed.
Okay. The other two things that I wanted to ask David and Luis what they think, and also María Gabriela, if you have any ideas. There is this translation my own thing.
Mhm.
When a translator writes translation my own, how is the reader going to know whether that's who said that, whether the translator said that or whether the author said that? Because also he's got coloring our own on those images. So he's using the same phrase, this my own, our own thing. I think it's time for translators to sign their work. I think translated by María Gabriela Marrero González, or if you want to just use your marvelous initials, MGMG, I think it needs to be said that way rather than just saying my own, even though that's what we've always done.
Okay, either that or what can be done is there can be a note. That's fine. I have nothing against that. Either that or you could put a note in the preface that any reference to translations, literally verbatim translation my own, refers to the fact that I actually translated these passages. I did not find a published translation of these particular excerpts.
However, under the assumption that someday this work of hers might be published, she might get a chance to, there might be a grant appear for you to translate this whole book and it might be published. She's not going to stick her PGT preface at the start of it. She might be allowed to write a preface, but the reader is not probably going to read prefaces anyway. A lot of readers don't. The reader, anything we do, notes, translations, punctuation, it's all for the sake of the reader, to make it clear for the reader, to make it readable and accessible to the reader. The reader is still not going to know, no matter how many prefaces you put that in. And yes, I agree, that would be a good thing to discuss in the preface. But in the practical sense, I think professional translators in our work need to take possession of our translations, if only to clarify who it is. Because as I said, he's got translation my own and he's got coloring our own. So, and the other thing is regarding the acronyms. For one thing, when you state the name of an organization in English and then put the acronym, there's no need whatsoever to put any phrase saying according to its abbreviation in English, because if both of them are English, it's obvious, or if both of them are Spanish, it's obvious.
Okay.
There's no necessity to do that. It's redundant.
Yeah, I would even suggest that if you don't refer to the acronym further on, you just don't put it. It's unnecessary unless you're going to talk to refer to it further on.
Okay.
If you're going to talk a praza or whatever acronym you define, it's because you're going to reference it
Later.
Many more
down the
times.
text. Yeah, if you're not going to do that, then it's no.
Okay.
It's not necessary. You can just eliminate that. I was going to suggest that.
But the other thing is this phrase that I see over and over. Usually we use acronym, but you took in your acknowledgments. This was right from the beginning, and then I saw it over and over throughout your text. You said the graduate program in translation, PGT by its Spanish abbreviation. I see others say by its Spanish acronym. Some say for its Spanish acronym. I think all of those sound clumsy and unnatural. Is there anything better we can come up with? It's not you, María Gabriela. It's what we all do, but.
Okay. There's a difference between acronym and abbreviation.
Right.
Okay. An acronym makes a word a sounded word itself. For example, WHO or UNESCO. But if it's just consonants together, it's not going to make a sonic word by itself.
Right, but there's another word for that that's not.
Initialization.
Yeah, right. That's what I was looking for.
Okay, now the thing is, all right, well, what do you propose then? And we'll do it.
I'm not proposing. I'm saying, can we come up with something that's better? Or do you not agree that by its Spanish abbreviation sounds awkward?
Initials, by its Spanish initials, by its Spanish initialization. But you can't say acronym because acronym doesn't apply here.
Okay, you're true. You're right. I just said that because that's the one that I usually see my students doing. I usually see by its Spanish acronym.
Yeah, but acronym is incorrect sometimes, so it should.
Okay. Okay, what I have been doing when it is an acronym, where some things are acronyms in Spanish and not in English, like CIA, like CIA and APA. that in English we say CIA and APA, but still, it's I wonder what it is in English that matters. I have sometimes put PGT, comma, Spanish abbreviation or Spanish initialism or Spanish acronym without having the by it's in there. But as you say, that requires the writer, the translator to distinguish between abbreviation, initialism, and acronym.
Do we need to put any explanation? Just put PGT and
Okay.
let the reader figure it's how the way we're going to be referring. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, that's.
Or
also-
maybe PGN in Spanish.
PGT, comma, in Spanish.
No, just saying, well, the name of our program is PGN, is PGT in Spanish. Just put in parentheses PGT in Spanish.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
that works, I think.
That was the name.
Okay, you moved again and now you just broke up.
But I can't find the meeting.
You're good. Your
Okay.
sound is good.
You're good. You're there.
Okay, I'm back. I was looking for the meeting and I was taking notes. Sorry. Okay, well, those are my comments, except to congratulate you on an excellent piece of work
Gracias.
and
Thank you.
welcome, colleague.
Gracias.
Thank you very much, Jane. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane.
Now, Luis, would you care to discuss, I'm sure you have some observations and comments.
Sure. I have two big issues here. The first one is on terminology. I'm very happy with all the research you've done, and I'm very pleased with the results of your comments. The only thing that I think it's our problem as teachers, as professors. The only problem I have is with the methodology, with your ¿cómo se dice? The references you research into and the references you use for your definitions. Merriam-Webster and Diccionario de la Lengua Española, those are common usage dictionaries, and you don't refer, at least you don't mention in your preface, any research using specialized glossaries, specialized terminology, term bases. You happen to come up with the right translations, but the process that you went through to get to those words, it can lead you to the wrong place, and this is what I wanted to stress, not for you because you actually came up with the right words, but for our students that are watching this or who watches in the future, when you're dealing with technical terms, you need to research using specialized dictionaries, specialized databases, just to make sure that you're speaking the language of whatever field you're researching. So that's my big critique on your research. And then the other thing is, can you explain to me why did you choose to call this a transcreation?
David talked to me about that. Yeah, because the archaic passages were very, I had to untangle them and think about them really well. So I called it transcreation because it was that effect of mirroring what the original author, the speakers in the passages were trying to say, and keep as well that archaic sort of feeling, and basically create a new thing, because That's what it is. I created the same passage in English or try
I'm gonna say this in
parallel.
Spanish. What you're
Uh-huh.
explaining to me right now is traducción pura y dura.
Okay.
It's plain translation and it's historical translation, which is the translation of historical text, which is the element that gives the biggest complexity to what you're saying, what you're translating, and the reason you need to work so hard to get an acceptable translation and into a more modern, comprehensible language. So I actually found a very interesting. Let me see if I think I have it here. And it's a very interesting paper that was published in 2021. It's a review, a literature review on the definition of transcreation, and I don't buy your arguments. No, I don't.
What does it say? What does it say?
It's basically it's a debatable term right now. It doesn't there's not a consensus on what it is, because it's something that's been discussed in literature for the last 10 years. So it's a changing and a topic that's being debated, but it's not. I don't think it and if you do want to argue that, then you need to add a pretty profound discussion, which is something I don't think you need to do. I think you already did a fantastic job with what you already did. So I would suggest that you just call it very hard translation of old documents.
A translation of historical and archaic historical text and archaic language.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
And by the way, María Gabriela was very stubborn with me about this because I didn't want her to use that term either, and I told her, you better be prepared to defend yourself when we get to your defense on that.
Yeah,
I thought you would buy it. I
won't buy it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No,
that's what I understood by
this is hard translation. This is difficult translation. And I would on that point, I would have liked that you have had focused a little bit more on a little bit of more historical research because of those archaic words. And for example, that problem with fuente, I think what you discuss in your presentation now, it's a very elegant resolution for the problem, but I still think probably source is always going to work better.
Well, in fact, actually, looking at this again, my feeling is that spring is but it really depends on which, and by the way, it's interesting because oh God, Rio Grande, the poem Rio Grande de Loíza includes a reference to fuentes, and the translator translated them as fountains. And so we have this idea that suddenly there are fountains coming out of the pit of the Rio Grande de Loíza, it's an absurd image, and it's a very, very bad translation. So my feeling is that and fuente sometimes is, fuente can mean many different things, and we know it's texto fuente, but source, but generally speaking, unless it's an actual structure that has water coming out you know, that somehow pressure is forcing water out of, then generally speaking, it would be a spring. If it,
Yes.
especially if it's
Yeah,
a,
like in the last part of your text, it's talking about fuentes, of those fountains, because it's like an actual physical
Sí.
fountain,
Sí.
which I cannot get out from my head. The fountain right beside the Virgin Mary in my school, the water fountain. So yeah, yeah, those are my two big problems
Okay.
with you're not telling me that. You're not telling me that that ¿cómo se dice? ¿Cómo se dice that transcreation argument? I before I forget, the first part of your presentation where
Mhm.
you talk about all of the social problems,
Uh-huh. A
Right
political
now?
point of view.
that was a beautiful presentation, and I'm pretty sure that you didn't talk about this in your preface.
No,
No.
that happened because a couple of weeks ago, Professor David and I had a meeting,
Mhm.
and he said, "Why don't you like go with this point of view, the political point of view?" Because I do mention it briefly, like in a little phrase, 500 years. But I thought it was a good idea. And he said, they will probably tell you to add it to your preface.
Well,
And I have no problem with it because I basically like
it's
did this.
we have a
skeleton,
very
so-
short-term memory as you said, we have a very short-term memory as como país, and as a country, and yeah, it needs to be written down.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, you should include that.
Okay.
Déjame ver, apart from that, let me see. I put some notes and I marked some things. Why did you use sick in some of your, like the example you just quoted?
Coordinates, the coordinate one.
Yeah.
Well, because I had to, in the source text, if you look at the transcreation and the footnote, it says 18 supo sup, 32.
Yeah, but
says
I mean,
that.
if you research and you saw that
Uh-huh.
probably was a scanner issue, that the way the scanner converted the text into something readable, maybe. I mean, I don't think it adds any information, and it actually confuses the reader because I'm trying to find what the mistake is in the text, and I can find it also with the name. You also put
Nepomuceno. See, because it
Nepomuceno.
was written with S, but the correct name is C. But Nepomuceno with S is the very archaic use of the name.
Well, so, well, I mean, you would put
Yes.
sick. You would put sick in the coordinates reading if you kept the soup. That you would put sick, because you said it's just like that.
yes.
If I put the original Spanish with supo sup, and then I put the translation
Yeah.
with the coordinates.
Yeah.
Okay, and I don't have it. Okay, I don't have it.
You don't have to have the sick there. You don't.
Yeah, you don't have to have it if you corrected it, and it's because otherwise I'm going to be looking at where's the thing that
See,
she's
where's the
reading.
problem?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm talking about translations, and I think you should always have the text in Spanish and then translate it in English, or other. I mean, I'd rather have the original than your translation afterwards. I'm not sure I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I was doing something else when we were talking about our translation.
See, translation my own.
I don't think you need to do that, because I mean, if it's a text from the 17th or 16th century, it's very probable that nobody's interested in translating it, and it was you that did it.
But no, I think Jane, I agree with Jane that
That's in the footnotes.
that in the footnotes you can put MG And
MG,
MGMG, there you go. Entonces,
Picture studio,
¿Cómo fue? ¿Cómo fue?
soon to become a major motion picture.
Sí.
Where, what? G.
Hi, Jane, we can hear you well. ¿Cómo fue eso?
It's not important.
Oh, okay.
okay. Measurements.
Ajá.
I don't think you should get into translating measurements. Just use the word in English. Because then it means that you need to get into historical research on how how things were. Just leave.
El de Fathoms Deep, tú
Sí,
dices.
exacto. Just leave leguas and whatever says in Spanish, just leave it in Spanish.
Yeah.
Because
Sí.
you might, this is historical and then you can get into very, very, very complicated things. Just leave it in Spanish and do whatever. Just what the author says, you just put it there because
Okay.
yeah, no. Porque I don't know if a legua is equal to a league and if it has changed historically, and then you need to do no te metas en eso.
Okay. So a
Yeah.
short legua, algo así decía, a short league away.
O legua corta.
In italics.
Huh?
In italics.
Yeah, exacto. Yeah, I marked that. Leave it.
Okay.
And then there's the water tanks.
Ujú.
Son aljibes.
Aljibe.
Yeah, I see blue water tanks all over the place when I read water tanks. I would suggest cisterns.
I think I had cisterns, but I'm not sure now. Professor David suggested that water tanks was like a more
Yeah.
used term, no?
Yeah, the problem with cistern, Luis, in English, is that sometimes it can also mean a place where refuse is flushed into.
A
And
place where what?
where you para aguas usadas.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
but the thing is that a water tank, I don't.
Reservoirs?
Water reservoirs maybe, but a water tank, I
Mira.
just see a blue water tank.
David is saying.
And this is and aljibes are under
Sí.
are under because they collect water, rainwater.
Look, what I would suggest then is do some research, perhaps within a historical context. However, I really, and I'm sorry about this, but people use the word in Puerto Rico. They say when people are speaking in English, they use the word cistern all the time. But the problem with cistern is that it can mean a place for wastewater as well. So I don't want that confusion. And that was, why this was, but look, you can do some more research on that and see if you come up with something else.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's just that water tanks just gives me such a.
And one thing I was going to suggest, Rob's Diccionario de Ingeniería is Inglés Español. Check there as well. That's an excellent dictionary, and by the way, you should be able to find it online as a PDF.
Okay, I'll look for that. Gracias.
Yeah, and this is my last question. Why did you? I know there are a lot of emphases in the source text that I don't understand why they are there. Probably that's why you remove them. But why did you choose to remove emphasis on from what the source text has on purpose?
Como por ejemplo.
Like italics and bold.
Bueno. So I don't know if you're referring to this, but I know that some sections were only like, for example, the letters. Some sections were dedicated only to passages from the letters, and they were in italics. But David and I, well, we basically concluded that it shouldn't be, it should be or italicized or not, because then inside the text, sometimes the author would make a reference to something said. They would cite, you know, something that had happened, another character, and they would put it as well in italics, but it should be in with quotation marks. So David basically told me this goes in quotation marks, but you have to choose like one thing, put it in italics or not. And I chose to leave it as it was, because for that part of the letters, it says that Rodrigo de Figueroa's letter to Charles V, algo así como que no a continuación, pero dejándote saber que lo que viene después son las secciones de Rodrigo.
Okay.
So I decided to leave it like that and not put it italicized.
Okay. So, okay, that's fine.
I just want on that note, this is being adapted also for the purposes of a thesis, and she's applying MLA style guide, and so certain things that you do with block quotes, there are certain things that you do that's expected in English based on MLA, which weren't followed really in the source text for whatever stylistic reasons. That also has to do with publication of the work, and those stylistic elements could be added, you know, were this to be published.
Yeah, no, I was just curious on why, because it's not, maybe you should, when you talk about your style guide and whatever on the, maybe you can add a small paragraph explaining that you took out all of those unnecessary marks or whatever.
See, I also made an indentation, so that also differentiates it from normal text.
Yeah. And apart from that, I just have to tell you, this is such a beautiful work, and I really want to congratulate you. I just needed to give you a little bit of a hard time because of those things, but otherwise, it's beautiful. I think it's practically flawless.
Gracias.
So yeah, I'm very happy. And this is a very interesting text. So please, any student that's looking at this defense, consider continuing her work, because it's very interesting.
It's a good book. Has a lot of information, a lot of old pictures that you see, and then you're like, oh, I go there all the time. And it's so different. So yeah. It's
important to remember the past, which we tend to want to forget. So anyway, just congratulations for such a wonderful job.
Gracias. I spent a lot of time with it.
Se nota. Se nota.
Gracias.
I think we're ready then to put up to send Maria Gabriela away for a moment, and also so that the readers can discuss the defense and the thesis. And so, Luis, are you taking care of that? Or
well, Barbara's taking care of that, so we ask our viewers in YouTube to stay there and wait for us a little bit until we're done. Barbara, can you take?
The source text is so important, and I really think that Luis's comments about, you know, including what you said in your introduction should be taken into account. Of course, all of the notes, you know, will be passed to you, but aside from that, we feel that there's nothing that we can do but give you a grade of sobresaliente con recomendación para publicar.
Ay, gracias. Gracias.
Yeah, congratulations. It was a very good job.
Gracias. It took a lot of time, and
yep, we know.
It was very difficult, but thank you.
It's worth it.
Yeah.
worth it. And no, it's a, the translation of this is a legacy to leave, for everyone. And, not only people in the United States, but people in the Caribbean who are English speaking, who face very similar circumstances and a history of colonialism, and neglect by the metropolis. So, I think it's very, very important.
I agree.
Fantastic working with you, Maria.
You too, Professor. Thank you so much for your patience and for all the guidance and for rereading and helping me so much.
Oh, it was a great pleasure.
And thank you to Jane and Luis, because you were also my professors in the past. So your teachings also reflect on what I do, and to the PGT and to the university for giving educación de excelencia. And of course to Dr. Aníbal for helping me. He also helped me a lot. Thank you.
That's a treasure when you've got an author
Sí,
that you can consult and is understanding of what the problem is, and understands what you're doing and can help you with it. I've had that experience and it's wonderful.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so we're also thanks to Dr. Sepúlveda for all the help.
Dr. Sepúlveda, and I've worked with him in the past. Also a tremendous pleasure. I hope that you can continue working with him, Maria Gabriela.
Let's hope so. Yes.
In any event, thank you everyone who is watching in, I guess that's it.